So let me introduce Professor Deng Haifeng a little bit. Professor Deng Haifeng is a professor of law at Tsinghua University, a prominent member of the Chinese Environmental Law Society, and expert in climate change law and environmental law. Professor Deng has been a really close friend of our Center for Energy and Environmental Law of Seoul National University. He has visited a number of times to attend the conference and wrote an article for Journal of Korean Law. I'm really happy that he can find time to join with us. It's a real pleasure and privilege to have Professor Deng Haifeng. So please give a big round of applause to welcome him.
Thank you. Sincerely thanks. Dear Professor Li and all the students of the law school of the Seoul University's law school. It's my great honor to attend this academic event. And also I sincerely thank Professor Li to give the introduction. And today I wanted to give a topic with the title about the legal issues of climate change migrant in China. Just as you know that China is a huge nation. So every year, China has to suffer a lot of the disasters. And climate change reasons cause the disasters play a very important role in our disasters regulations and disasters control systems. So today I wanted to share 3 different topics. The first is the general introduction about the current situation on climate change-induced migrants in China. So with this introduction, I wanted to show you the real situation about our facing ways. And the second, I also wanted to show you the legal obstacles that all these migrants, especially to the spontaneously, the migrants are facing with through different 2 cases. And at last, I also wanted to give some suggestions for how to removing such obstacles. Okay, now first I wanted to show you the real situation about China. Just as you know that China suffered the very heaviest natural disasters every year, and the natural disaster risk that China faced is increasing from 2010 to now. And there will be a large numbers of the migrants caused by the climate change issues in China in the future. We also think that it is true. So I wanted to do the research about how to remove the legal obstacles and give the enough help for these migrants to overcome all these difficulties. So before I give the introduction about my research, I also wanted to share a definition about what we think that climate change induced the migrants. I think that this person who spontaneously or be forced to the migrate temporarily or permanently from their hometown to other region or to other countries caused by the influence by the climate change is the climate change induced migrants. And this might also show the current situation about China's climate change, the disaster. And at the same time, a lot of the climate change induced migrants will caused by these disasters. So nowadays, there has 3 different areas in China has a very serious disasters caused by the climate change. The first is the upper reaches of Yangtze River and Yellow River. Here is the original resource of these 2 long rivers. And due to the land degradation in these areas, may lead the local residents to migrate to the Tibet Glacier and the East Coast areas. So these areas person have to move to these areas or move to these areas. The second is west and northwest of China, these areas. Now from this map, you could see now here is Korea. Here is the west and northwest of China. And these areas also caused the drought and desertification. Due to this reason, the local residents also have to move to other places. And the third areas is southeast coastal areas, these areas. Every year, this will often cause a lot of the typhoons and floods due to the climate change issues. One example, last year, Taizhou City is here, Zhejiang province. For about 6.679 million people in these areas last year have been affected by the super typhoon Litima, and 39 people died caused by the typhoon, and many of the people have been lost. So from this map, you could see that here, here, and here, 3 different regions caused a very serious disasters due to the climate change issues. And this region also the very rich region, the GDP of this region account for about 50 of the whole China. So if their region has a very serious the climate change disasters will cause a lot of loss. All these pictures shows the different disasters caused by typhoon, by earthquake, and any other disasters influenced by the climate change. So how to remove the obstacles that the migrants are faced with and help them to settle down has become a very serious issue, both for the Chinese government and for the Chinese society. So the second part of the presentation, I also wanted to share the legal obstacles that these migrants will face through the 2 different cases. The first is Tuanjie village. The Tuanjie village is a typical immigrant village, which located in the central exit zone of Ningxia. From the last picture, I will show you where is Ningxia. Here, Ningxia is here. Tuanjie village cases, Ningxia is here. And another cases is in Yunnan here. So Tuanjie village is a very good village that at the end of 2015, the village had welcomed for about 8,313 climate change-induced migrants from the neighborhood counties. These 2 pictures shows the daily activities for the migrants. And another case in Yunnan province is Taiyuan City. The Taiyuan City is only 300,000 people, and it has accepted thousands of climate change-induced migrants and settled down them in different towns and villages. And these 2 pictures shows that children from the climate change-induced migrants without the residence registration are unable to acquire the right to receive the education. So from these 2 cases, I wanted to tell you why the climate change-induced migrants will face a lot of problems caused by the current legislation. The first is to the migrants, it is extremely hard for them to obtain the residence registrations in resettlement areas. So before I show you the content about these problems, I wanted to give some background about our household registration systems. This is a Chinese characteristic system, and it is a household management policy implemented in China since last century, 50s. And this system indicates the legality of the natural life in the local areas. So the household registration systems is the fundamental social regulation systems. It divides the population according to the relationship between the region and the familiar members, and it divides the registered residents into different groups. One group as rural household accounts, and the other as urban accounts. Through these different catalogs to manage the population law. So that's the household registration systems. It is the fundamental systems of China community and the Chinese society. So nowadays, the scholars had analysis. The system has some drawbacks. The first is the dualistic social management of urban and rural household accounts is not conducive to the equal development between cities and villages. The second is linking the household registration with some economic, cultural, and educational rights. But it is difficult for those persons who have not registered registration residents to share their right equally. If they could not make the registration in the resettlement areas, they could not share all these rights equally. So that's the problem. This two picture also shows the household registration systems in China. From these two pictures, you could see that this is the household registrator, issued by the Public Securities Administration. And when we open this registrator, we will see there has two kinds of the accounts. This account is for urban person, urban account, and this is for the rural account, the two different accounts. And each group has the different rights. If you moved from the urban areas to the rural areas, due to you could not obtain the resettlement areas registration, you could not share a lot of the rights, locally rights. So that's the problems. So based on this background, we know that China household registration systems deprives the possibility of obtaining the residence registrations in resettlement areas for climate change induced migrants. Because all the public services and the welfare are bounding with these systems. So the climate change induced migrants who migrate spontaneously, maybe they caused by a very serious disasters, so they could not make a living in their original areas. They have to move to another places. But this movement is spontaneously, not arranged by the government. To these people, to this group's people, they could not obtain the corresponding rights and interests on land and equal rights of the political, democratic, healthcare, education, and employment in the resettlement areas. So that will cause the very serious problems, and also cause the very difficult for the group to make a living. That's the first obstacles. And the second one I wanted to show you is that the climate change induced the migrants also unable to share or to obtain the fully enough rights and interests on land. Here I also have to give another background information about our local systems. That systems called the Rural Collective Economic Organization. Why I wanted to show you this organization? Because in China, all the rural areas land ownership belongs to the collective economic organization. So this organization refers to the economic organization that have the ownership of the rural land. And it originated from the agricultural cooperation movement in the earlier 1950s. And it is an autonomous economic organization composed of farmers according to the resources of their residential areas. And in rural areas, the farmers don't have the land ownership. Just as you know that in China, all the land ownership in cities or urban areas belongs to the state. And in the rural areas, all the land ownership belongs to the different rural collective economic organizations. So if farmers, they wanted to use the rural land for production, and the first, they need to become a member of a collective economic organization, which distributes the cultivate line, horse diet, or other means of the products, such as the horses or the cows or some facilities to the farmers and to their families. So the rural collective economic organizations are different from the enterprises, social organizations, and administrative organs. So in China, farmers' economic rights are realized by their collective economic organization, such as the right for social security, medical security, education, and so on. So if a farmer or if migrants, they could not obtain the status of a rural collective economic organizations, especially they could not obtain the resettlement areas, the status of a rural collective organizations. They could not make a living. It is very difficult because they could not use the land of the rural areas. So here also the pictures I wanted to show you. This is the certificate for collective economic organizations. And here is the useful rights for the farmers that issued by the collective organization. They could use the land of the collective economic organization. So the second problem is land in the rural areas is owned by the collective economic organization. And the fundamental requirement of obtaining the right to use the land, to use the house site for the migrants is being members of the resettlement collective organizations. So if they could not be the members, on the one hand, the migrants are unable to obtain the lands, both for the farming or for the living. On the other hand, they cannot transfer their rights from the land in the original residence into their resettlement areas smoothly, which means that their property established on the original residents could not be moved to the new areas. This will also cause the very huge damages for the migrants. That's the second problems. And the third problems I also wanted to show you is the religious conflicts between the migrants and the local residents. Just as you know that in China, there also has several different religions, and especially in the rural areas, the different rural areas person maybe has the different religious beliefs. So, our constitutional law protect the different persons' religious beliefs. But if you from the one places to another places, maybe the different regions person has the different religious beliefs. So to the climate change induced migrants, they maybe also encountered the obstacles on the religious beliefs during the integration into their resettlement areas. Here I also want to give an example. This example is in the Tuanjie village. That Tuanjie village, the induced migrants moved into Tuanjie village are all the Hui Muslims, and they believe in two Islam denominations, and they wanted to build their own mosques. In Tuanjie village, there were more than 20 mosques, and all the mosques hold the religious activities individually. They don't share the mosques due to the religious reason. They don't share the mosques. And this situation leads to waste of the resources and also will cause the conflicts between the immigrations. Now here, the picture shows the mosques of Tuanjie village. Now here is a mosque, a very big mosque. And here is the religious activities of the Hui Muslims. And here is another religious activities of them. So from the all this introduction, I think that you may know that nowadays in China, to the climate change induced the migrants, especially to the migrants spontaneously from the original places to the resettlement places, they usually will facing the different difficulties, and especially to them, they will face the three different difficulties. One caused by the household registration systems, the other caused by the rural collective organizations land policy, and the third is caused by the religious conflicts. So how to remove these obstacles? I also wanted to show you some research. And this research based on the analysis, different scholars and analysis. The first is reforming the current household registration systems. Scholars suggest that an unified urban and rural household registration systems should be built. And the social security system also should be improved. From the above introduction, you will know that China's household registration systems divide the Chinese person into different accounts. One is urban account and another is rural account. So the scholars suggest that we need to establishing a unified identity systems, and all the citizens should not be divided into the two groups. One is urban and the other is rural, and the unified identity systems should be established so that we could break the obstacles that to do harm for the flow from the rural areas to the city and from the city to the rural areas. Once the conditions get the mature, I think that China should abolish the current household registration systems and set up a system for urban residence certificate. which has both the fairness and flexibility. This the one suggestion. And second, we also need to improving the current social security systems. The urban pension systems nowadays only covered the person in urban areas. And scholars suggest that the urban pension system should cover the migrants move from the countryside to the city. So China should establish a national-wide coordinating pension fund to solve the urban residents' pension problems. At the same time, the migrants who existed from the rural social security system should be accepted by the urban social security systems, which means if the rural areas person, they want to move to the urban areas, then they could bring their rural account to the urban account. And then they could bring all the interests and all the social security protections interest to their urban account. And the second part is protecting the migrants' right and interests online. This suggestions is for to solve the second problem about how to share or equally share the rights online. The first that we think that specifying the standard of the substitution of the right to the farming land and the circulation of house site under certain conditions. First, the Department for Land Administration can set up a national database to classifying the land into the different catalogs according to the different functions, and then reclassifying the similar kind of the land according to the different values. Based on this kind of the database, the government can circulate the standard of the substitution of the cultivated land and confer the interest in land to the climate change-induced migrants, and which could balance the conflicts between the migrants and the original members of the resettlement areas. That's the first suggestions. And second, we also have to revise some the legislation. I think that the legislation should amend the articles of the land administrative law, which limited the circulation of house site, and provide a legal basis for circulation of house site. In China, all the farmers' house, they use the collective organization's land. They also have to apply the house site line. So a national-wide land use right circulation market should be established, and then the land use quotas can be circulated as a kind of the property right, which means if the rural areas person, they wanted to move another places, such as another rural areas or to move to the urban areas, they could sell their house site original areas house site quotas to the original areas person, and then they take this money to the urban account or to the urban areas to buy the new house site land use right. I think that's the second suggestions. And the last suggestions is according to the third obstacles about the religious beliefs protection systems. The first, we think that China should strengthening the protection of the freedom of the religious beliefs. First, the government should protect the normal religious activities effectively according to the law. Here we also have to make a clarification about what kind of the activities are normal religious activities. I think that based on our law, The normal religious activities is including the holding religious ceremonies, to publish the religious books and religious endowments and selling the religious articles and so on. That's the first suggestion. And the second one, we also need to protect the right to conduct the normal religious educational activities for the professional religious personnel. The professional religious personnel refers to the person who have been recognized and recorded by lawful registry in the religious organizations, and they have been put on the record by the State Bureau of the Religious Affairs. So if they had made the registration and had get the permit to do the religious activities, then the normal religious educational activities of them should be protected. And the second, I also think that we need to add in the liability provisions on protection of freedom of religious beliefs. This also due to the current situation about our legislation. Through our analysis, we know that China has no liability provisions on the violations of freedom of religious beliefs. So from our criminal law, Miller has a provision on public servant of the state organs who illegal deprive citizens' right to religious beliefs, but there are no specific provisions on the same infringement act of other person or other social organizations. And people who infringe upon the other person's freedom of the religious beliefs will bear no criminal, civil, or administrative liability. So I think that the provisions of the liability on infringing upon the citizens' freedoms and religious beliefs should be added into the existing religious legal systems, so that all the climate change induced the migrants who has the religious beliefs, their beliefs could be protected. And when they get the household registration systems, and when they also get the protection about the land useful rights, then the daily life of them will change the better and better than before. Okay, that's all I wanted to share with you under this topic. Thanks for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Haifeng. It was a very interesting presentation. So now we have students who might have questions to Professor Deng's presentation. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to make a first question. Thank you for your wonderful talk about this issue. Like this July, like East Asia as a whole experienced an unprecedented series of floods, like not just Korea, but Japan, Burma, Taiwan, and China, Thailand, and so on. And we know that in July there was a series of floods affecting so many provinces in China, and major dams failed to control the sheer volume of rainwater and had to open its gates, leading to more floods in various provinces. So my question is, how was in general the damage caused by the floods in July? And another question is that it has been reported, by, for instance, South China Morning Post, that there has about rumors that there is a shortage of food or crops due to flood, probably induced by this year's flood. And there's speculation that like China recently implemented a scheme to reduce food waste across the country, and there's speculation that that's because of the food shortage. So Is that true? To what extent is it true?
Okay, thanks for your very good questions. The first about the floods in July. I think that every year China will cause a lot of the floods disasters, and every year, especially in summer, will facing a lot of the floods. This year also some floods happened in south of China. From my experience, I think that Hunan province, Jiangxi province, and Guangdong province, Zhejiang province also facing a lot of these disasters. But I also wanted to share with you because we have a specific law about the disasters control, and we also have a specific administrative plan for how to dealing with this kind of the emergency. So China has established administrative systems to regulate all these kind of the disasters. And at the central level, we have administrative agency. It caused the emergency arrangement, the department. And when the natural disasters happen, the Chinese government will to give a lot of the financial support to the local government used for to dealing with the disasters, especially for food, for the medicine, for some houses, for all the these persons in the areas. This is the administrative systems, and at the local level, we also have established these administrative systems to give the help of the local persons. So based on these administrative systems, China had useful systems to deal with the disastrous damages. Another is to how to compensate the damages, just as you had said. We also have these two kind of the systems. One system is the insurance, social insurance. Some of the local person, maybe they had buy the business insurance, but the government also has permit a kind of the social insurance systems. So if the farmers, they lose their productions, if the citizens, they lose their houses, we could also use the insurance systems to give the compensation to the local person and local enterprises and other kind of the civil entities. That's the insurance systems. Despite of these systems, we also have another systems, which means caused by the civil society. The donation from the civil societies also take a very important role in the disasters control and the disasters compensation. Every year, some of the NGOs and the civil non-government organizations and civil organizations also will donate a lot of the resources in these areas. So the very detailed damages in the July's floods, I could not give you because I don't do the statistic of current this year's the disasters. But I think that even in this summer, we caused the coronavirus issues, and at the same time, I also caused the floods. But China had controlled all the emergencies based on these two kinds of the systems. That's the first questions for your questions. A better pardon, please repeat the second question.
My second question was that there has been a speculation over the rumor that there is a food shortage caused by this year's flood, and there like at least rumors reported by like South China Morning Post and others. Yeah, and to what extent is this true? And yeah.
I don't think it is true because one very interesting phenomenon will give you the answer to you. That is the price of the food. If there is a huge shortage of the food supply, then the price of the food will much higher than before. But in the summer, all the food prices of Chinese mainland are very stable. And in the disastrous areas, we also have some very huge, the food deposit in the different areas. China also has established the food deposit systems. Each province has the deposit of the food, such as the vegetables and oils and meats and other things. So I think that from the Central Statistic Bureau's data, they had told us that all the food deposits of China could be used 2 years for all the citizens in China. So I don't think that China will has the situation that lack of the foods because we have a lot of the food deposit. So I don't think that this situation is the real things. Thank you
very much.
Yeah, I also had a question. Thank you very much for the talk. Could you, I think it was the third last slide or the second last slide. I just didn't understand something, and it would be very nice if you could repeat it to the end. It's
which one?
The third last slide or the second last slide. I'm not exactly sure. It's about the religious personnel. Okay. Next one. One more, please. One more. Okay, one more, please. Wait, where is it? It was about religious personnel that should be authorized by the state, and I didn't really understand that point. So it's just my question. If you could elaborate on that point a bit more. Is the slide? Where's the slide?
Okay, maybe
no,
this one?
Oh, no, it's more at the end. I'm so sorry. I should have checked. One more, maybe. And one more. Where is it? No.
This one.
Yeah, it's this one. It's this one. Yeah, it's this one. Sorry, yes. I have about the last part of the slide. I'm not exactly sure. The right to conduct non-religious education activities of professional or religious personnel. Yeah, I was just not sure what you exactly meant with that because I didn't really understand. How can that be of use? Sorry if that's a basic question.
Okay, no problems. Because nowadays in China, based on our constitutional law, we has established a system to protect the religious beliefs, and everyone has the freedom for their religious beliefs. And the government also wanted to protect the freedom of the religious beliefs. But at the different places, I think that the real situation may be different. Maybe in the city areas or in the developed areas, the protection is much better than the poor places, such as the rural areas, because the local government has the financial resources. if we wanted to give enough the protection, they need to have the enough the financial supported or financial resources, such as in Huanjie villages cases. If the climate change induced the migrants, they moved from the original places to the resettlement places. They wanted to build their own mosque. Then the local government have to give them the financial support or to give them the enough money to build their own mosque, because based on the local habits, the religious groups, the different persons, they don't want to share the mosques. They only want to use their own mosques. If the original person, they don't want to share the mosques to the new person moved into this resettlement, then the new person have to build their own mosques. So that need a lot of money, maybe also need the land. Even they wanted to, if they wanted to build the mosques, they need land. So, which means that maybe at different areas, the climate change induced the migrants, which has the religious beliefs, maybe caused these problems because maybe they don't have the enough money to build their own mosques. And then where they could do their religious activities, that's a problem. That's why I wanted to show that the government should protect the normal religious activities according to the law. The local governments maybe have to give the more financial support or more other kind of the support to the climate change induced the migrants, because they don't have enough resources to realize their religious beliefs because they just move a new places. That's the reason. Thank you. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Can I make another question about like the general or climate policy in China?
Okay.
Oh, so as we all know, China like a couple of weeks ago declared the goal of making Chinese economy net zero emissions by 2060, and which was instrumental for the declaration of net zero in Japan and in Korea. But it seems that the focus of Chinese policy in terms of economy and climate has traditionally been focusing on the issue of economic growth. And while China has become the biggest, in terms of nominal GDP, the biggest economy in the world, like even surpassing the United States, still there are many issues in China. While China successfully eradicated technical poverty over the last 3 or 4 decades, there is still a lot of issue regarding income inequality and wealth inequality, and in terms of the lack of development of infrastructure in rural areas, countryside. And so how does the China see this issue of making the issue of decarbonization in terms of its relationship with economic growth?
Okay, thank you for your question. Just before we make sure this title about today's presentation, Professor Li also asked my question about these issues, because our universities and other groups also attend the research on these issues. Just as you know that China, our leader, pledged in the UN General Assembly conference to achieve the carbon neutrality in 2060s. All the Chinese scholars also think that it is a very huge and very aggressive purpose to realize this purpose. And it will give us a lot of pressures. to change the economic structures. So just as you are concerned, a lot of Chinese scholars also think that we should step by step to push forward this aim. Because just as you know, that China is a huge economic entity, and the different areas in China mainland also has the different level of the development. In the east coast areas, the economy is developed very fast. Maybe it had reached developed countries level, but in the north of China, it's very poor, especially in rural areas. So the unbalanced development is the typical characteristic of China's economy. So how to balance the different regions' development is a huge challenge to the Chinese government. So in the long run, for about 30 years later, we think that if we wanted to push forward to realize this aim, very big challenges we are facing to how to control or how to change the domestic economic structures. Just as you know that I also think that we need to push forward our efforts to realize this purpose. And this purpose also contains two different phrases. The first is to 2030, we have to reach the carbon emission peak, which means that after 2030, China's carbon emission should lower step by step. So before 2030, what kind of measures we could do? I think that in the law areas, we have some opportunities and some measures, which means the first, I think that I wanted to share some information to you based on the environmental law and energy law in the current situation in China, because I'm not a scholar focusing on the economic and on the management, but the scholar focusing on the environmental law, energy law. So maybe we could, from the some new changes from the recent development of our legislation, to see what kind of the measures we could do. The first is our civil code had introduced a green rule to solve the environmental crisis. That means today, this year, one of the highlights of China's legislation this year is adoption of the civil code on May 28. And the civil law plays a very important role in the basic legislation in the social life for a country, for a community. So I think that the establishment of the green rule will take a very great impact on the living habits and behaviors of the daily life of the person. The major changing in the revision of the civil code is the principle of the green development is established in the general provisions, and will the behavior of the civil entities should be conducted to environmental protection and sustainable development in the parts of the contract law, property law, and infringement law. So based on these new changes, I think that it has given us the basis or had given us the fundamental legal basis to push forward the green development that will change the original behavior, original habits for the person's daily living models, and force them to change their living models to environmental friendly models. and then we'll push forward our carbon emissions targets to realize our short-time purpose. That's the one areas I think that we should do. The second, maybe you had to pay attention. This year, we also enacted another law, which means we had revised our solid waste law. And based on this law, we have established a new systems to control the plastics pollution in China. We wanted to control the plastic pollutions products, especially in the packaging of the goods, so that it will lower the person's consumption of the fossil oil, fossil energy. And then we'll also do good to the environment and do good to the realize or the purpose of the carbon emission control. And the last, I think that it also takes a very important role in our climate change issues. That is the energy sectors. And DEAR has two new regulations or two new measures will push forward in the energy loss areas. The first is in 2020, this year's May, the China published its energy law. It also a draft, which lists the renewable energy as a priority areas and breaks down the binding targets to local administrative regions. That means that China will put huge financial support to the renewable energy sectors. And China hopes that the renewable energy could change the energy structures of the society. And when to the 2060s, we hope that the renewable energy will account for about in the total energy consumption in our society. That's a very huge challenge because we have a lot of the traditional energy consumption nowadays. The traditional energy consumption nowadays in China for about 85%. So that's a huge challenges, but we have to do. And another areas as Chinese government, CIPA, also wanted to push forward the home country's emission trading systems this year. Just as you know that in 2016, we had established the national-wide the emission trading systems, but in fact, it only covered the power plants sectors. They don't cover a lot of other energy sectors. So this national-wide emission trading systems will broaden the sectors, despite of the traditional power plants. Maybe they also divide into maybe they also wanted to cover the transportation sectors, such as the aviation areas and the this kind of the new sectors, so that we will push forward the whole society to change the traditional model to the new model. Okay, that's I think that from the recent legislations change we could see, but to the whole countries, how to realize these targets for 2060. I think nowadays China is just in the phrases to drafting the 14th 5 years plan. Maybe we could learn some new measures from this comprehensive plan, but nowadays we could not give a very detailed introduction because I think we don't have the very detailed plan now. Thanks for your question.
Thank you for a detailed answer. I think it's time to finish this session now. Is there anyone who'd really like to make a final comment on the talk or make a final question to Professor? Professor J-Up, do you have anything to say?
Just thank you very much for taking the time to give a wonderful talk to our students. We were really interested to hear about the China situation. Some of our students are from my climate change, international environmental law class, but also a climate change class. So that's why I ask you to say something about the Chinese recent pledge to go carbon neutral. But your talk today, migrant workers situation, it's kind of more related to adaptation aspects of the climate change. And it was a really insightful and enlightening presentation. So I really thank you very much. And I think that our students learned a lot from your presentation. So
thanks, Professor Li. It's also my great honor to have this opportunity to share my opinions and discuss with you and your lovely students. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So give him another big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.